The morning sun cast a golden glow over Buckingham Palace as preparations for one of Britain's most cherished traditions began in earnest. Trooping the color, the magnificent ceremony celebrating the monarch's official birthday was about to unfold with all its pageantry and splendor. Inside the palace walls, members of the royal family were making their final preparations for what would become an unexpectedly touching day. Princess Charlotte, now 9 years old, stood before her bedroom mirror as her nanny carefully adjusted the delicate blue dress that had been specially chosen for the occasion. The young princess had always shown a natural grace beyond her years, but today there was something different in her demeanor. Perhaps it was the way she held herself a little straighter, or the thoughtful expression that crossed her face as she watched the bustling activity outside her window. Prince William, dressed in his ceremonial Irish Guards uniform, was reviewing the day's schedule when he received word that his daughter wanted to speak with him privately. This wasn't unusual, as Charlotte had always been particularly close to her father, often seeking his guidance and sharing her observations about royal life with a wisdom that sometimes surprised even him. When William entered Charlotte's room, he found her sitting quietly on the edge of her bed, her hands folded neatly in her lap. There was something almost ceremonial about her posture, as if she understood the gravity of the day ahead. The morning light streaming through the tall windows highlighted the determination in her young face, a quality she had inherited from both her parents. "Papa," Charlotte began, using the informal term she reserved for private moments with her father, "I've been thinking about today and what it means." Her voice carried a seriousness that seemed beyond her years, yet retained the innocent curiosity that made her such an endearing presence within the royal family. William sat down beside his daughter, recognizing the importance of this moment. Throughout her young life, Charlotte had shown an intuitive understanding of her role and responsibilities, but today felt different. There was a maturity in her approach that suggested she was beginning to grasp the deeper significance of their family's public duties. The palace around them hummed with activity as staff members made final preparations for the day's events. Guards were taking their positions, musicians were tuning their instruments, and the distinctive sound of horses' hooves could be heard in the courtyard below. Yet in this quiet corner of the palace, father and daughter shared a moment that would prove to be more significant than either could have imagined. Charlotte explained to her father that she had been watching the news and reading about the ceremony in preparation for the day. She had noticed how people gathered from all over the country, and indeed the world, to witness this tradition. More importantly, she had begun to understand that their presence on the balcony wasn't just about waving to crowds, but about representing something much larger than themselves. "I want to do it right today, Papa," she said, her blue eyes meeting his with a directness that caught him slightly off guard. "I want people to see that we understand how special this is, not just for us, but for everyone who comes to watch." William felt a surge of pride and emotion as he listened to his daughter's words. Here was a 9-year-old girl who was beginning to comprehend the weight of tradition and the responsibility that came with her position. Yet she wasn't intimidated by it. Instead, she seemed energized by the opportunity to contribute meaningfully to something that brought joy to so many people. The conversation that followed revealed Charlotte's remarkable awareness of the world around her. She had noticed how her great-grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, had conducted herself during public appearances, and how her grandfather, now King Charles III, approached his duties with both dignity and warmth. Charlotte expressed her desire to honor that legacy while also bringing her own authentic personality to her public role. As they talked, William realized that his daughter was experiencing a pivotal moment in her young life. The transition from child to future royal was beginning to take shape, not through formal instruction or protocol training, but through her own natural development and observation. She was choosing to embrace her responsibilities rather than having them imposed upon her. The bond between father and daughter had always been strong, built on shared interests, mutual respect, and William's determination to give his children as normal a childhood as possible while preparing them for their future roles. Charlotte had inherited her father's sense of duty, but she was expressing it in her own unique way. Outside, the sounds of preparation grew louder as the time for departure approached. Soon, they would make their way to Horse Guards Parade, where thousands of spectators would gather to witness the spectacular ceremony. The thought of all those eyes upon them might have daunted another child, but Charlotte seemed to draw strength from the knowledge that she had a meaningful part to play. William took a moment to study his daughter's face, seeing traces of her mother Catherine's determination alongside his own sense of purpose. Charlotte had always been the most outgoing of their three children, naturally gravitating toward public interactions and seemingly comfortable with the attention that came with her position. Today, however, he sensed a deeper commitment forming within her. The princess stood up and walked to the window, gazing out at the crowds already beginning to gather along the mall. Her small figure was silhouetted against the bright morning sky, and, for a moment, William caught a glimpse of the woman she would one day become. There was something both touching and inspiring about watching his daughter consciously choose to embrace her role with such grace and maturity. "I understand now, Papa," Charlotte said, turning back to face her father. "It's not about us, is it? It's about what we represent, and how we can make people feel proud and happy to be part of something beautiful and historic." The wisdom in her words struck William profoundly. In that moment, he realized that his daughter had grasped something that some adults struggled to understand about royal duty. It wasn't about personal glory or privilege, but about service and the ability to inspire others through their example and presence. As they prepared to leave for the ceremony, William felt a deep sense of gratitude for this private moment with Charlotte. The day ahead would be filled with public duties and ceremonial obligations, but this conversation had revealed something precious about his daughter's character and their relationship as father and child. The journey to Horse Guards Parade would mark the beginning of what would become a truly memorable day, but for William, the most significant moments had already occurred in the quiet privacy of Charlotte's bedroom. His daughter had shown him that she was ready to take her place in the family's public life, not as a reluctant participant, but as an enthusiastic and thoughtful contributor to their shared mission of service. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky, casting its warm light over London as the royal family prepared to embark on another chapter of their ongoing story. For Princess Charlotte, this would be the day she truly began to understand her place in that story. And, for Prince William, it would be the day he witnessed his daughter's remarkable transition from child to young royal with a profound sense of purpose. The journey from Buckingham Palace to Horse Guards Parade provided Charlotte with her first real glimpse of the day's magnitude. As their carriage made its way through the streets of London, she pressed her face to the window, watching in wonder at the thousands of people who had gathered along the route. Union Jack flags fluttered in the breeze, and the excited chatter of the crowds created a festive atmosphere that seemed to energize the young princess. William observed his daughter carefully during this journey, noting how she had positioned herself to wave at the right moments while maintaining the composure they had discussed earlier. There was something different about her demeanor today, a newfound confidence that seemed to radiate from within. She wasn't simply going through the motions of royal protocol. She was genuinely engaging with the experience and the people who had come to witness it. As they approached Horse Guards Parade, the scale of the ceremony became fully apparent. The parade ground was a sea of red tunics and bearskin hats as hundreds of soldiers from the Household Division stood in perfect formation. The morning sun glinted off their brass buttons and ceremonial weapons, creating a spectacular display of military precision that had been refined over centuries of tradition. Charlotte's eyes widened as she took in the sight before her. She had attended Trooping the Color before, but never with such acute awareness of its significance. The ceremony represented more than just pageantry. It was a living embodiment of British history and tradition, connecting the present royal family to generations of monarchs who had come before them. The princess had spent considerable time in the weeks leading up to this day learning about the ceremony's origins and meaning. She knew that Trooping the Color dated back to the 17th century, when colors, or flags, were carried into battle so that soldiers could identify their regiments in the confusion of combat. The tradition of trooping these colors before the assembled troops helped ensure that every soldier would recognize their regiment's flag. What fascinated Charlotte most was understanding how this military tradition had evolved into a celebration of the monarch's official birthday, bringing together elements of history, ceremony, and public celebration in a uniquely British way. She appreciated that she was not merely observing history, but participating in its continuation, adding her own chapter to a story that stretched back through centuries. As their carriage came to a stop, Charlotte could hear the distinctive sound of military bands tuning their instruments and the gentle nickering of the horses that would soon participate in the ceremony. The air was filled with anticipation, and she could sense the excitement of the spectators who had gathered in the stands surrounding the parade ground. Prince William helped his daughter from the carriage, and together they made their way to their designated positions. Charlotte had rehearsed the protocol numerous times, but Experiencing it in this grand setting felt entirely different from their practice sessions at the palace. The weight of tradition seemed to settle around her like an invisible cloak, but rather than feeling burdened by it, she found herself inspired. The ceremony began with the traditional inspection of the troops, and Charlotte watched in fascination as her grandfather, King Charles III, rode slowly along the ranks of guards. The precision of their movements and the solemnity of the occasion impressed upon her the dedication and professionalism of the men and women who served in the household division. What struck Charlotte most powerfully was the connection between past and present that the ceremony represented. These were not museum pieces or historical reenactments, but living traditions carried forward by real people who took pride in their role as guardians of British heritage. The guards standing at attention had trained for months to achieve this level of perfection, and their commitment to excellence reflected the same values that her family tried to embody in their public service. As the ceremony progressed, Charlotte found herself naturally falling into the rhythm of the event. When the massed bands began to play, she felt the music resonate through her body, understanding for the first time how sound and spectacle could combine to create something truly transcendent. The precision of the military maneuvers, the vibrant colors of the uniforms, and the soaring melodies of the traditional tunes created a sensory experience that was both overwhelming and inspiring. William noticed how his daughter's attention never wavered throughout the lengthy ceremony. While other children her age might have grown restless or distracted, Charlotte remained completely engaged, her eyes following every movement, and her ear attuned to every musical phrase. It was clear that she was not simply enduring the event, but actively absorbing and appreciating every aspect of it. The moment that would later be remembered as particularly touching occurred when the ceremony reached its climax with the march past. As regiment after regiment filed past the royal dais, Charlotte spontaneously reached for her father's hand. It wasn't a gesture born of nervousness or uncertainty, but rather one of shared appreciation for the magnificent spectacle unfolding before them. William felt his daughter's small hand slip into his, and the simple gesture conveyed more emotion than words could express. In that moment, he realized that Charlotte was not just participating in the ceremony, but truly understanding its deeper meaning. She was connecting with the history, the tradition, and the responsibility that came with their family's role in British society. The princess had positioned herself so that she could see not only the military parade, but also the faces of the spectators in the stands. She was fascinated by the range of emotions she observed: the pride of military families watching their loved ones participate in the ceremony, the excitement of children seeing the pageantry for the first time, and the quiet satisfaction of older spectators who had witnessed this tradition unfold year after year. Charlotte began to understand that their presence at these events was about more than protocol or obligation. They were there to share in moments of collective pride and celebration, to serve as focal points for national identity and continuity. The ceremony was as much for the spectators as it was about the royal family, and her role was to help create an experience that people would remember and treasure. As the final regiment marched past, and the ceremony began to wind down, Charlotte maintained her composed demeanor while internally processing everything she had witnessed. The precision, the pageantry, the history, and the human emotion had all combined to create an experience that would stay with her for the rest of her life. William squeezed his daughter's hand gently as they prepared for the next phase of the day's events, the return to Buckingham Palace and the balcony appearance that millions of people around the world would watch. He could sense that Charlotte had been transformed by what she had experienced, not in any dramatic way, but through a deeper understanding of her place in the ongoing story of the British monarchy. The journey back to the palace would provide time for reflection, but already William could see that this Trooping the Color ceremony had marked a significant milestone in his daughter's development as a member of the royal family. She had moved beyond simply participating in these events to truly appreciating their significance and embracing her role within them. As they prepared to leave Horse Guards Parade, Charlotte took one last look at the ceremony ground, now beginning to empty as the military units marched away. The flags that had been trooped with such precision were being carefully folded and put away, but the memory of their colorful display would remain with everyone who had witnessed it. For Princess Charlotte, this ceremony had been a revelation. She had discovered that duty could be joyful, that tradition could be inspiring, and that her presence at such events could contribute to moments of shared national pride. The young princess was beginning to understand that being royal was not about privilege but about service, and she was ready to embrace that responsibility with enthusiasm and grace. The return journey to Buckingham Palace provided father and daughter with a precious opportunity to share their thoughts about the ceremony they had just witnessed. As their carriage rolled through the streets of London, Charlotte's excitement was evident, but it was tempered by a newfound understanding of the responsibility that came with public appearances. "Papa, did you see how the guards never broke formation, not even once?" Charlotte asked, her voice filled with admiration. "Even when that horse got a bit restless, they stayed perfectly still. That must take incredible discipline." William smiled at his daughter's observation, impressed by her attention to detail and her ability to appreciate the professionalism of the soldiers. "You're absolutely right, Charlotte. Those guards train for months to achieve that level of precision. They understand that they're not just individuals in those moments, but representatives of something much larger." The parallel between the guards' dedication and their own role as royals was not lost on either of them. Charlotte had begun to understand that public appearances required a similar kind of discipline and commitment to something beyond oneself. The ceremony had shown her that excellence in public service required continuous effort and unwavering focus. As they approached the palace, Charlotte could see the crowds that had gathered along the Mall and around the Victoria Memorial. Thousands of people had positioned themselves strategically to catch a glimpse of the royal family's return and, more importantly, to witness the traditional balcony appearance that would follow. The sight of so many people waiting patiently in the warm June sunshine deeply moved the young princess. She realized that for many of these spectators, attending Trooping the Color was a special occasion, perhaps a once-in-a-lifetime experience or an annual tradition that connected them to their sense of national identity. "Look at all those families, Papa," Charlotte observed, pointing to groups of people who had clearly made a day of the celebration. "Some of those children are even smaller than Louis. Their parents must have brought them here to be part of something special." William followed his daughter's gaze and saw what she had noticed: the mixture of generations represented in the crowd, from elderly spectators who had witnessed decades of royal ceremonies to toddlers experiencing their first royal event. It was a reminder of how these traditions serve to connect people across age groups and backgrounds and shared experiences of national celebration. The carriage passed through the palace gates, and Charlotte waved enthusiastically at the crowds. But there was something different about her approach now. Her waves seemed more purposeful, more conscious of the individual people she was acknowledging. She had moved beyond the mechanical gestures of royal protocol to genuine engagement with the public. Inside the palace, there was a brief period of preparation before the family would appear on the famous balcony. Charlotte used this time to gather her thoughts and prepare for what she now understood would be the culmination of the day's events. The balcony appearance wasn't just a traditional finale to Trooping the Color. It was an opportunity to share a moment of joy and connection with the thousands of people who had gathered to celebrate. Charlotte had always enjoyed balcony appearances, finding excitement in the sea of faces looking up at them and the thunderous cheers that would erupt when the royal family stepped into view. Today, however, she approached this moment with a deeper appreciation for what it meant to the people below. As they made their way through the palace corridors toward the balcony, Charlotte walked alongside her father, their earlier conversation about duty and responsibility still fresh in both their minds. The young princess had clearly internalized the lessons of the morning, and William could see a new maturity in her bearing. The family gathered in the room adjacent to the balcony, and Charlotte took a moment to look around at her relatives, her mother Catherine, her brothers George and Louis, and the other members of the royal family who would be appearing together. She realized that they were about to participate in a moment that would be photographed, filmed, and remembered by people all over the world. When the doors to the balcony opened, the sound that greeted them was extraordinary. The cheers of the crowd seemed to rise up from the mall like a wave, carrying with it the enthusiasm and affection of thousands of people who had waited patiently for this moment. Charlotte stepped forward with her family, and the sound grew even louder. Standing on the balcony, Charlotte could see the vast expanse of the mall stretching out before them, packed with people as far as the eye could see. The red, white, and blue of countless Union Jack flags created a spectacular display, and the excitement in the air was almost tangible. This was the moment when all the morning's ceremony and tradition culminated in a direct connection between the royal family and the people they served. What happened next would be remembered as one of the most touching moments of the entire day. As Charlotte stood at the balcony railing, taking in the magnitude of the scene before her, she naturally moved closer to her father. It wasn't a choreographed gesture or a planned photo opportunity, but a spontaneous expression of the bond they shared and the significance of the moment they were experiencing together. William placed his hand gently on his daughter's shoulder as they stood side by side, both of them waving to the enthusiastic crowd below. The gesture was protective and loving, but it also conveyed a sense of partnership and shared purpose. Father and daughter were united not just by family bonds, but by their commitment to serving the people who had gathered to celebrate with them. The crowd's response to this tender moment was immediate and heartfelt. The cheers grew even louder, and many spectators could be seen pointing and smiling at the obvious affection between father and daughter. In that instant, Charlotte and William embodied everything that people hoped to see in their royal family: warmth, authenticity, and genuine care for one another and for the people they served. Charlotte continued to wave enthusiastically, but she also took time to really look at the faces in the crowd. She could see families pointing up at the balcony, children waving flags with delight, and older spectators who seemed moved by the spectacle. The connection between the royal family and the public felt genuine and mutual in that moment. As they stood together on the balcony, William was struck by how naturally Charlotte had adapted to this very public setting. There was no artifice in her behavior, no sense that she was simply going through the motions. She was genuinely enjoying the interaction with the crowd and seemed to understand intuitively how to balance royal dignity with approachable warmth. The appearance lasted for several minutes, during which the family acknowledged different sections of the crowd and shared in the collective celebration. For Charlotte, these minutes felt both eternal and fleeting. She wanted to savor every moment while also ensuring that she was fulfilling her role appropriately. When the time came to step back from the balcony, Charlotte took one final look at the crowd, waving with both hands in a gesture that seemed to encompass all the joy and gratitude she felt for the experience. The response from below was overwhelming, with cheers and applause that continued even after the family had moved away from public view. Back inside the palace, Charlotte was quiet for a moment as she processed what had just occurred. The transition from the public spectacle of the balcony to the private family environment was always somewhat jarring, but today it felt particularly significant. She had experienced something profound on that balcony, a connection with the British people that went beyond mere duty or obligation. "Papa, that was incredible," she finally said, her eyes still bright with excitement. "Did you see how happy everyone looked? It felt like we were all celebrating something wonderful together." William nodded, understanding exactly what his daughter meant. The balcony appearance had indeed been special, not just because of the ceremony that had preceded it or the traditions it represented, but because of the genuine human connection that had been established between the royal family and the thousands of people who had gathered to share in the celebration. The moment they had shared on the balcony, the natural way Charlotte had moved closer to her father, the protective and loving gesture of his hand on her shoulder, and their shared engagement with the crowd, had created something beautiful and authentic that resonated with everyone who witnessed it. For Charlotte, this experience had been transformative. She had discovered that public service could be joyful and meaningful, that traditions could be both solemn and celebratory, and that the connection between the royal family and the British people was something real and valuable that required nurturing and respect. The afternoon following the balcony appearance found the royal family in a more relaxed setting within the private quarters of Buckingham Palace. The formal ceremonies had concluded, but Charlotte's mind was still processing the extraordinary events of the day. She had experienced something transformative, and her father could see that she needed time and space to fully understand what it all meant. William suggested they take a walk in the palace gardens, away from the lingering excitement and the various family members who were still discussing the day's events. Charlotte readily agreed, sensing that she wanted to continue the conversation they had begun that morning in her bedroom. The garden provided the perfect setting for reflection and deeper discussion. As they strolled along the familiar paths, Charlotte was unusually quiet at first. William recognized this as a sign that his daughter was thinking deeply about something important. He had learned over the years that Charlotte processed significant experiences thoroughly before sharing her thoughts, and he respected her need for that internal reflection time. The palace gardens were particularly beautiful in the afternoon light, with the formal flower beds displaying their summer colors and the ancient trees providing patches of cool shade. It was a peaceful contrast to the excitement and pageantry of the morning's events, offering a space where father and daughter could speak freely without the constraints of public observation. "Papa, I keep thinking about all those people who came to watch today," Charlotte finally said as they paused near a fountain. "Some of them must have traveled very far, and they all seemed so happy to be there. It made me realize that what we do really matters to them." William was struck by the maturity of his daughter's reflection. At 9 years old, she was beginning to grasp concepts that some adults struggled with. The idea that public service was about creating meaningful experiences for others, not just fulfilling obligations or maintaining traditions for their own sake. "You're absolutely right, Charlotte," William replied. "I think what you discovered today is that our role is really about service to others. When people come to events like Trooping the Color, they're looking for something special, a connection to history, a sense of shared identity, and maybe just a moment of joy and celebration in their lives." Charlotte nodded thoughtfully, her blue eyes reflecting the seriousness with which she was considering these ideas. "I used to think that people came to see us, but now I think they come to be part of something bigger. We're just there to help make that happen." The insight was remarkable coming from someone so young, and William felt a deep sense of pride in his daughter's developing understanding of their family's role. Charlotte was discovering that true leadership was about enabling others to have meaningful experiences, rather than being the focus of attention for its own sake. As they continued their walk, Charlotte began to share more specific observations from the day. She had noticed how the military personnel had taken obvious pride in their performance, how families in the crowd had seemed to be creating lasting memories together, and how the ceremony had brought together people from all walks of life in a shared celebration. "I saw this one little boy who couldn't have been much older than Louis," Charlotte recounted, her face animated with the memory. "He was sitting on his father's shoulders, waving his flag so enthusiastically. His whole family was laughing and taking pictures. They looked like they were having the most wonderful time, and I realized that we had helped make that moment possible for them." William was moved by his daughter's ability to see beyond herself and focus on the experiences of others. This quality, the ability to derive satisfaction from serving others rather than being served, was essential for anyone in their position, but it was particularly remarkable to see it developing so naturally in someone so young. The conversation turned to Charlotte's feelings about future. He told Charlotte about his early public appearances, his nervousness and uncertainty, and how he had gradually come to understand the importance and satisfaction of public service. "I remember feeling overwhelmed at first," William admitted. "There seemed to be so many rules to remember and protocols to follow. But eventually, I realized that the most important thing wasn't perfect protocol. It was genuine care for the people we serve and authentic engagement with the opportunities we have to make a positive difference." Charlotte listened intently to her father's reflections, absorbing not just his words, but the emotion behind them. She could see that he had found real meaning and satisfaction in his role, and that knowledge helped her feel more confident about her own future within the royal family. The conversation naturally evolved to include discussions about Charlotte's brothers and how each of them was developing their own understanding of royal life. Charlotte expressed particular concern for Louis, who was still very young, and her desire to help him feel comfortable and confident during public appearances. "George understands a lot already because he's older," Charlotte observed, "but Louis sometimes looks a bit overwhelmed during ceremonies. I want to help him the way you've helped me understand everything." William was touched by his daughter's protective instincts toward her younger brother and her desire to share what she had learned. It was another sign of her developing maturity and her natural inclination towards service and care for others. As the afternoon shadows grew longer, William realized that this conversation had been as significant as any formal education or protocol training Charlotte might receive. Through her own observations and reflection, she had developed a sophisticated understanding of royal duty and public service that would serve her well throughout her life. The day had begun with Charlotte expressing her desire to do it right during Trooping the Color, but it had evolved into something much more profound. She had discovered not just how to fulfill her role appropriately, but why that role mattered and how it could be a source of joy and fulfillment rather than obligation. Charlotte stood up from the bench and looked back toward the palace, where the day's events had unfolded. "Papa, I feel different than I did this morning," she said quietly. "Not in a sad way, but in a good way. I feel like I understand something important now that I didn't understand before." William stood beside his daughter, understanding exactly what she meant. Charlotte had experienced a coming-of-age moment that had nothing to do with her chronological age and everything to do with her emotional and intellectual readiness to embrace her role with purpose and enthusiasm. The walk back toward the palace was contemplative, with both father and daughter reflecting on the day's events and their significance. Charlotte had begun the day as a child participating in a royal ceremony, but she was ending it as a young person who understood her place in something larger and more meaningful than herself. As they reached the palace entrance, Charlotte turned to her father with a smile that combined childlike excitement with newfound wisdom. "Thank you for helping me understand all of this, Papa. I feel ready for whatever comes next." William hugged his daughter, feeling grateful for the privilege of witnessing her growth and development. The day had been significant for both of them, but in different ways. For Charlotte, it had been a day of discovery and understanding. For William, it had been a day of recognizing that his daughter was becoming the thoughtful, compassionate, and dedicated young woman he had always hoped she would be. Evening descended gently over Buckingham Palace as the royal family gathered for a private dinner to reflect on the day's extraordinary events. Charlotte had changed from her formal ceremony attire into comfortable casual clothes, but her demeanor still carried traces of the newfound maturity she had displayed throughout the day. The transformation in her understanding and approach to royal duty had been remarkable to witness. During dinner, various family members shared their observations and experiences from Trooping the Color. Charlotte listened attentively to these discussions, contributing her own thoughtful comments and questions. It was clear that she was processing the day's events within the broader context of royal history and tradition. "I keep thinking about all the people who have stood on that balcony before us," Charlotte mused during a quiet moment in the conversation. "Great-grandmother must have appeared there so many times, and each time must have been special for the people watching." Her reference to Queen Elizabeth II was particularly poignant, as Charlotte was beginning to understand the continuity of royal service across generations. The young princess was recognizing herself as part of an ongoing story that connected past, present, and future in service to the British people. William watched his daughter navigate these conversations with increasing confidence and insight. Charlotte was not simply repeating things she had been taught or trying to say what she thought adults wanted to hear. Instead, she was expressing genuine thoughts and feelings that demonstrated her authentic engagement with her role and responsibilities. After dinner, as the family began to disperse to their various evening activities, Charlotte approached her father with a request. She wanted to look at some of the photographs and videos from the day's events, particularly the balcony appearance. This wasn't vanity or self-consciousness, but rather a desire to understand how their interactions had been perceived by others. William arranged for them to view some of the media coverage in a comfortable sitting room within the palace. As they watched footage of the ceremony and their balcony appearance, Charlotte was fascinated to see how their spontaneous moments of connection had been captured and shared with the public. "Look, Papa, you can see exactly when you put your hand on my shoulder," Charlotte observed, pointing to the screen. "And look at how the crowd responded. You can actually see people in the audience smiling and pointing at us. They seemed to really appreciate that moment." William was struck by his daughter's analytical approach to viewing these images. Rather than focusing on how she looked or sounded, Charlotte was studying the interaction between the royal family and the public. She was learning to see these events from multiple perspectives and to understand how small gestures could have significant impact. The media commentary accompanying the footage was overwhelmingly positive, with commentators noting the authentic warmth and connection displayed by the royal family, particularly the touching moments between William and Charlotte. Professional royal watchers and casual observers alike had been moved by the genuine affection and partnership they had witnessed. The commentators keep using words like heartwarming and authentic, Charlotte noticed. "I think that means people could tell that we really meant it, that we weren't just acting or following a script." Once again, William was impressed by his daughter's perceptiveness. Charlotte had identified something crucial about public service, that people could distinguish between genuine engagement and mere performance. The sincerity of their connection and their authentic enthusiasm for the ceremony had resonated with audiences because it was real. As they continued to review the day's coverage, Charlotte began to understand how their private family dynamics translated into public perception. The love and respect that existed between father and daughter in their personal lives had been visible to everyone watching, creating a positive impression that enhanced the public's connection to the royal family. I understand now why you and Mama always talk about being ourselves during public appearances, Charlotte said thoughtfully. People want to see who we really are, not some perfect version that doesn't exist. The insight demonstrated Charlotte's growing sophistication in understanding the balance between royal protocol and authentic human connection. She was learning that effective public service required both respect for tradition and genuine personal engagement. Later that evening, as Charlotte prepared for bed, she and William had one final conversation about the day's events and their significance. Charlotte expressed gratitude for the opportunities she had been given and excitement about future occasions when she could contribute to public celebrations and ceremonies. I want to keep learning about all the different aspects of what we do, Charlotte said as William tucked her into bed. Not just the ceremonies, but the charities and causes we support, the people we meet, and all the ways we can help make things better for others. William was moved by his daughter's expansive vision of royal service. Charlotte was not thinking narrowly about specific duties or obligations, but broadly about how she could use her position and privileges to make a positive difference in the world. This holistic understanding would serve her well throughout her life. The day had begun with a 9-year-old girl who wanted to do it right during an important ceremony. It was ending with a young person who understood that doing it right meant much more than following protocol. It meant engaging authentically with others, serving with genuine enthusiasm, and finding joy in opportunities to contribute to shared celebrations and meaningful traditions. As William turned off the lights in Charlotte's room, he reflected on the extraordinary transformation he had witnessed in his daughter over the course of a single day. Charlotte had not only participated successfully in a major royal ceremony, but had also experienced a profound moment of understanding about her role and purpose that would influence the rest of her life. The heartwarming moments they had shared, from their private morning conversation to their natural connection on the palace balcony, had not been planned or choreographed. They had emerged from the genuine love and respect that existed between father and daughter, and from Charlotte's authentic enthusiasm for embracing her responsibilities with grace and purpose. For the public who had witnessed these moments, they represented everything positive about the royal family: warmth, authenticity, dedication to service, and genuine care for one another and for the people they served. The touching interactions between William and Charlotte had reminded everyone of the human element that underlies all royal ceremony and tradition. As the palace settled into evening quiet, William felt profound gratitude for the day's events and their significance. He had watched his daughter take a major step forward in her understanding and embrace of royal life, and he had been privileged to play a supportive role in that development. The bond between them had been strengthened through shared experience and mutual respect. The images and memories from this Trooping the Color ceremony would endure long beyond the day itself. For Charlotte, they would serve as a reference point for understanding how public service could be both meaningful and joyful. For William, they would represent a pivotal moment in his daughter's development and a beautiful expression of their relationship. Most importantly, for the thousands of people who had witnessed these events either in person or through media coverage, the day had provided a powerful reminder of what the royal family could represent at its best: tradition combined with authenticity, duty balanced with warmth, and service delivered with genuine enthusiasm and care. The young princess who had begun the day hoping to do it right had discovered that doing it right meant being true to herself while respecting the traditions and responsibilities that came with her position. Charlotte had found her own voice within the context of royal service, and that voice promised to contribute something valuable and meaningful to the ongoing story of the British monarchy. As London settled into the night around them, father and daughter could both rest knowing that they had participated in something truly special, a day that would be remembered not just for its pageantry and tradition, but for the genuine human connection and authentic family bonds that had been shared with the world.